Picture a massive, like a multi-ton industrial steel tank. Thick metal, heavily reinforced, built to hold hundreds of thousands of gallons of volatile industrial chemicals.
Mm.
Now imagine that massive steel structure suddenly crushing in on itself, just instantly, violently, exactly like a flimsy aluminum soda can when you just, squeeze it in your fist.
It's terrifying.
It is. Like, how does that even happen? What kind of terrifying invisible force can crumple industrial steel like paper?
It's honestly one of the most frightening and counterintuitive phenomena in engineering.
Yeah.
Because the physics behind it completely defy what you might expect from heavy industrial infrastructure.
We are going to unpack exactly what that invisible force is today. Welcome to this deep dive, by the way. But before we get into the answer, I need you to do me a quick favor. Please take a second to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on the notification bell. It really helps us bring these deep dives to you every single week.
And just a quick housekeeping note you need to hear regarding the Martin Stevens versus OpenAI situation.
Right.
To be clear, this is not a lawsuit.
Right.
There is a voluntary quiet period currently in effect at Martin Stevens' request. The dead man switch has not been activated, and he is physically and legally safe.
Good to know.
And finally, explicitly, this update should not give the impression that any settlement discussions are actually underway.
Okay, got it. All right, let's get into the mission for today's deep dive. We are looking at an absolute tragedy that just unfolded at a paper mill in Longview, Washington.
Yeah, it's a rough one.
The stack of sources on the table today is intense. We've compiled local and national news reports from the ground, data from an official chemical engineering safety database, marine safety flashes, and even real-time, highly technical insights from a community of professional chemical engineers.
It's a lot of data to sift through.
It is. But our mission is to break down the human toll, the environmental fallout, and the exact physical mechanics of how a catastrophic failure like this actually happens.
Because it really is this profound web of intersecting failures. You're looking at chemistry, structural engineering limitations, and corporate safety cultures all like colliding in one devastating moment.
Exactly. So let's put you right at ground zero. It's Tuesday morning, roughly 7:20 a.m. You are in Longview, Washington. It's a city sitting right on the southern border with Oregon, hugged by the Columbia River.
Right.
And the site is the Nippon Dynawave packaging facility. Now, this isn't some small offshoot warehouse. This is a massive, sprawling pulp and paper mill.
Yeah, to really grasp the scale here, you have to look at the workforce. This facility employs about 1,000 people.
Wow, 1,000.
Yeah, you have roughly 550 working on the pulp and paper side and another 450 in the liquid packaging plant. And Longview and the surrounding area have a population of about 115,000.
Okay.
So mathematically, almost 1 in every 100 people in that entire region works at this specific site. I mean, it is the beating industrial heart of the community.
And at 7:20 a.m., that heart basically stops. Disaster strikes. And the initial confusion is just staggering. Reading through the early fire department dispatches, they initially estimated that an 80,000-gallon chemical tank had collapsed.
Dude, it's already huge.
Right. But as the smoke cleared and emergency crews actually got a visual on the mangled steel, that number was completely revised. It wasn't 80,000 gallons. It was a 900,000-gallon tank.
And that scale of miscalculation, tells you everything you need to know about the chaos of the immediate aftermath. First responders were walking into a literal fog of war.
Yeah.
The structure was so deformed they couldn't even accurately gauge its original footprint.
Think about that size for a second. If you picture a standard Olympic-sized swimming pool that holds roughly 660,000 gallons of liquid.
Right.
This industrial tank was built to hold nearly 1.5 Olympic swimming pools. When a structure that massive fails, the human toll is devastating. Based on the reports we have, at least one person is confirmed dead. 9 workers are completely unaccounted for. And 9 people, and that includes one of the responding firefighters, were critically injured.
And the injuries described in medical updates, they are severe. First responders weren't dealing with blunt force trauma alone here.
Yeah.
They were dealing with horrific chemical burns and serious inhalation injuries. The victims had to be rushed to local hospitals, primarily Peace Health St. John Medical Center.
Right, but some had to be moved, right?
Yeah, the most critical cases, at least 4 of those workers, had to be life-flighted or transferred to the Legacy Oregon Burn Center in Portland.
Oh, wow.
Which, is the only specialty burn clinic in the entire region equipped to handle this level of chemical trauma.
Reading the reports from the local union hall, it's the Association of Western Pulp and Paper Workers. It is just gut-wrenching. They had to immediately convert their hall into a family assistance center.
I can't even imagine.
You have crying family members, social workers, emergency responders shuffling in and out, people from the town just dropping off flowers on the sidewalk. A former school board member was quoted talking about the unimaginable pain of wives having to tell their children that their father isn't coming home from a Tuesday morning shift.
The psychological ripple effect on a tight-knit community like Longview just cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
The local fire chief even told reporters that his own first responders have friends and relatives who work at that Nippon Dynawave site. If you live there, every single ambulance siren you hear could be for someone you share a fence with or go to church with.
But this brings me to a detail in the incident reports that just stopped me in my tracks.
What's that?
You have a 900,000-gallon tank that has structurally failed. You have 9 missing workers in the rubble. Yet the reports state that emergency crews are literally paralyzed.
Yeah.
They are unable to safely conduct recovery operations. If you are an incident commander and your people are missing in that wreckage, what could possibly keep you from sending rescue teams in it immediately?
Well, it comes down to the horrifying reality of what was actually inside that tank. It wasn't holding wastewater or wood pulp. It was holding a chemical compound known in the paper industry as white liquor.
White liquor, which, it sounds like something you'd find in a moonshine jar, but looking at its chemical makeup, it is incredibly dangerous.
Extremely. It is a highly caustic, intensely corrosive mixture, primarily made up of sodium hydroxide and sodium sulfide.
Okay.
Its entire purpose in a paper mill is destruction. You mix this chemical with high heat and pressure to essentially digest solid wood chips.
Digest them.
Right. It aggressively breaks down the tough lignin inside the wood so the plant can extract the soft, usable pulp to make paper.
If it is chemically engineered to melt down solid timber, the idea of what it does to human skin or lung tissue is horrifying.
That is precisely why the chemical burns on the survivors were so catastrophic. And bringing this back to the paralyzed rescue crews, even after the initial rupture and spill, authorities estimate there are still approximately 90,000 gallons of this flesh-eating material trapped inside.
Just sitting there.
Exactly, trapped inside the unstable, mangled remains of the tank itself.
So these rescue crews are staring at a jagged mountain of twisted steel, knowing there are 90,000 gallons of corrosive acid just waiting to spill if the structure shifts even an inch while they are digging.
They are trapped in a deadly, immediate dilemma. Do you try to pump out and safely remove those remaining 90,000 gallons of product first?
I mean, that sounds logical.
It does. But if you do, changing the volume of liquid changes the weight distribution, which risks a total catastrophic collapse of the remaining steel while you're pumping.
Oh, God.
Or do you try to send steelworkers and riggers in to structurally stabilize the tank first? But that puts human beings right in the drop zone if the steel snaps.
The incident reports mention they are actively terrified of something called Tank A and Tank B mixing.
Right. In massive industrial sites, you often have various highly reactive chemicals stored in relatively close proximity.
Makes sense.
If this compromised white liquor tank fully collapses, the sheer kinetic force could breach neighboring tanks holding entirely different chemicals.
And then what happens?
Well, if incompatible chemicals mix in the open air, you aren't just dealing with a spill anymore. You could trigger a secondary explosion or release a massive, lethal, toxic gas cloud over the entire facility and all those responders.
Wow. We also have to talk about the environmental fallout, too, because the containment was already breached during the initial failure. Spill responders from the Washington Department of Ecology had to deploy immediately because this white liquor flooded into the site's storm drain system.
And those storm drains connect directly to a diking system that manages water runoff.
Right.
The facility had to scramble to manually shut off the diking pumps that normally discharge into the nearby Columbia River. If they hadn't, you would have seen massive, highly toxic contamination of a major waterway.
I was reading through the ecology reports, and I realized something kind of counterintuitive. Whenever we see an oil spill on the news, the immediate response is always deploying those bright orange floating booms to corral the spill, right?
Yeah, standard procedure.
And then they use skimmers to literally scoop it off the surface. But the ecology spokesperson explicitly stated they couldn't use booms here. Why is a massive chemical spill treated so differently than an oil spill in the water?
It all comes down to the fundamental chemistry of the liquid itself. Oil is hydrophobic. It chemically repels water, which means it doesn't mix.
Right. Oil and water.
Exactly. It stays buoyant and floats on the top of the surface tension, allowing you to physically rope it in with booms and skim it off. White liquor, however, is a water-soluble alkaline solution.
So it behaves more like dropping sugar into hot tea.
Exactly like that. Once white liquor hits the water in a drainage ditch or a river, it completely dissolves and integrates into the water column. You cannot physically separate it or skim it.
That's terrifying.
As the Department of Ecology pointed out, it simply cannot be contained once it's in the water. The only strategy is to let it self-neutralize by heavily diluting it with more water over time.
So you just have to wait.
You are forced to just monitor the pH levels, dilute the area, and hope the toxicity drops before it devastates the local aquatic ecosystem.
That makes the reality of this so much darker. We know the horrific nature of the chemical, the damage to the workers, and the environmental threat. But knowing that a fortress of steel meant to hold 900,000 gallons of this stuff just folded in on itself, it breaks my brain a little bit.
It's hard to visualize.
How does the physics of this actually work? Earlier, I used the analogy of crushing an aluminum soda can.
The soda can is a good visual, but a better mechanical analogy for vacuum collapse is a plastic water bottle.
Okay, let's explore that. Imagine taking an empty, flimsy plastic water bottle. You seal your lips around the top and suck all the air out. The sides instantly cave in and crush together. That happens because you created a vacuum inside, so the normal air pressure outside the bottle is suddenly much greater than the pressure inside, forcing the plastic to collapse. Are you saying that exact same mechanism can crush multi-ton industrial steel?
Yes. The only difference is the scale.
Wow.
We're talking about the physics of vacuum collapse in atmospheric tanks. And when you look at the engineering facts from the Cheming Zone source we reviewed, the numbers are deeply unsettling.
Unsettling in what way?
Because of how shockingly little pressure difference it actually takes to destroy steel.
Really?
Think about how these massive storage tanks are engineered. They are built specifically to hold immense outward pressure, the crushing weight of 900,000 gallons of liquid pushing out against the steel walls.
Right, they're meant to keep stuff in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But because they are optimized for outward force, they are incredibly weak when it comes to inward pressure. A pressure differential of just 50 to 100 millibars is enough to trigger a total buckling instability in a thin-walled steel tank.
Wait, 50 to 100 millibars. Standard atmospheric pressure at sea level is over 1,000 millibars. You're saying a drop of less than 10% of normal atmospheric pressure can crush a steel building.
It sounds impossible, but you have to multiply that tiny drop in pressure over the massive square footage of a 900,000-gallon tank.
Oh, the surface area.
Yes. When you take 50 millibars of inward force and apply it across thousands of square feet of steel surface area, the total crushing force becomes astronomical. The structural integrity simply folds.
But how does a vacuum like that even get created inside a chemical tank to begin with?
Well, the marine safety flash we reviewed from the International Marine Contractors Association gives a perfect, real-world example of how easily this happens.
Okay, what happened there?
They documented an incident where a 26 cubic meter tank made of highly durable carbon fiber holding a chemical called MEG imploded violently, and the cause was shockingly mundane.
Like what?
Third-party operators were using heavy machinery to pump the liquid out of the tank, but they simply failed to open a manual air inlet valve on the roof of the tank.
So it's exactly like putting your finger tightly over the top of a plastic straw while you try to suck the liquid out of the bottom.
That is the exact mechanism. Physics dictates that if you pump a massive volume of liquid out of a sealed container, an equal volume of air must come in to replace it.
Otherwise, a vacuum forms.
Right. If a single manual valve is left closed by a tired operator, or if an automated vent gets blocked by debris, the industrial pump keeps pulling liquid out. That creates a massive vacuum inside the tank, and the external atmosphere simply crushes the structure.
Just because of one closed valve.
Yeah. In the marine incident, the operators lacked documentation and just didn't know the valve needed to be opened. The vacuum stress built up silently for 5 days before the carbon fiber violently imploded.
That brings up a fascinating debate I saw when we were looking at the real-time insights from the professional chemical engineers over on the Reddit forum, our chemical engineering.
Oh yeah, that was an intense discussion.
These are industry veterans reacting to the Longview news as it broke, and they were heavily divided on what actually caused this specific collapse.
The community there immediately pointed out a critical detail. White liquor tanks are typically atmospheric tanks, meaning they're designed to operate at normal ambient air pressure, not under a vacuum.
Okay.
So a vacuum collapse shouldn't even be possible unless a series of fail-safes went terribly wrong.
One of the engineers theorized that historically, 9 times out of 10, a collapse like this boils down to operator error.
Right.
They suggested someone might have accidentally been emptying the tank while the whole system was blocked in, meaning the isolation valves were shut, and the vacuum breaker valve, which is supposed to automatically let air in during an emergency, was stuck shut due to lack of maintenance.
Which would perfectly replicate that plastic water bottle effect.
Mhm.
The pump pulls the white liquor out, the breaker valve fails to open, the vacuum builds, and the steel crumples.
But there was pushback on that too.
There was. A significant faction of engineers in that same forum looked closely at the initial aerial photos of the Longview wreckage and strongly disagreed with the vacuum theory.
Right. They pointed out the way the metal was torn. They argued it looked much more like a structural shell failure or a massive weld failure.
Yeah, like a microscopic crack in a seam that had been corroding for years finally just unzipped under the sheer weight of 900,000 gallons of liquid pushing outward.
And that structural failure theory gained immense credibility later that evening, didn't it?
It did. During the press conference, local fire officials actually changed their official wording. In the morning, they called it an implosion. By the evening, they deliberately stopped using that word and officially reclassified it as a failure.
Why does that semantic shift matter so much?
Because an implosion explicitly implies a vacuum event, the inward crushing force we talked about.
Ah, okay.
A failure is a broader term that strongly implies the structural integrity of the steel or the welds simply gave way and burst open. We won't know the definitive physical cause until state metallurgical inspectors can actually get into the rubble and examine the stress fractures on the metal.
Whether it was a stuck vacuum valve or a corroded weld, it forces us to ask the ultimate question of accountability. Was this a freak, unavoidable, one-in-a-million physics anomaly, or were there glaring warning signs? We have to look at the broader industry context here.
When you pull back and look at the U.S. Chemical Safety Board, the CSB database, this is definitely not an isolated danger.
No.
Between 1998 and 2024, the database flags 5 major catastrophic incidents, specifically within the paper and pulp industry.
5 major ones.
Yeah. These facilities are incredibly hostile environments for infrastructure. They run continuous high-temperature operations involving highly corrosive chemicals and complex pressure vessels. A mundane, routine operation can escalate into a fatal disaster in a matter of seconds.
Which makes the specific track record of Nippon Dynawave so important to examine. They are a massive subsidiary of a Tokyo-based global group. They bought this specific Longview mill from Weyerhaeuser back in 2016 for $285 million. We're not talking about a scrappy mom-and-pop operation struggling to keep the lights on.
No, they have immense financial backing.
Yeah.
And their safety record leading up to this disaster definitely has some highly concerning blemishes. The Washington Department of Labor and Industries has cited them multiple times.
What kind of citations?
In one instance, they were fined $700 for an elevated work platform that completely lacked protective guardrails.
Okay, I have to pause you there, and I really want to push back on how this regulatory system works. You just mentioned this is a company that was purchased for nearly $300 million.
Right.
And the fine for putting workers on a platform with no guardrails is $700.
It is a staggering disconnect. They were also cited, though notably not fined, for a horrific incident where an employee's finger was actually amputated by rigging equipment.
Oh my God.
The citation was issued because the company literally moved the bloody equipment from its original position before state investigators could arrive, which completely compromises the accuracy of the safety investigation.
Moving the scene of an amputation before the state gets there, that implies a deeply concerning culture. What about their environmental track record?
The Department of Ecology recently fined them $6,500 for air and water permit violations, specifically for discharging excess industrial solids into the wastewater system and releasing excess sulfur dioxide into the air.
Okay.
And if you go back to 2017, there was a major event where 4,000 to 5,000 gallons of sulfuric acid spilled at the plant. It was thankfully contained by an earthen moat, and no one was injured, but the precedent of chemical spills is there.
So again, I have to ask, do these relatively microscopic fines do anything at all to force a massive corporation to upgrade their safety infrastructure? Or does a corporate accounting department just look at a $6,000 environmental fine as the cheap cost of doing business, rather than spending millions to replace edging steel tanks?
You are hitting on one of the most persistent criticisms of the industrial regulatory framework.
Yeah.
The reality is that agencies like OSHA or state equivalents like labor and industries are often bound by strict, outdated statutory limits on how much they can fine for a standard citation.
Which is wild.
For a company dealing in hundreds of millions of dollars in global revenue, a $700 fine is literally less than a rounding error. It absolutely does not provide the financial incentive required to trigger a massive multi-million-dollar capital overhaul of aging plant equipment.
But looking through the Department of Ecology's statements, they actually defended the plant's recent tank history, didn't they?
They did provide important context, yeah. The ecology spokesperson explicitly noted that Nippon Dynawave had 0 recent environmental penalties, specifically related to their chemical storage tanks.
So the tanks themselves weren't flagged.
Right. Their compliance history didn't point a blazing red arrow at a looming chemical storage collapse.
However, labor and industries contradicted that sense of security by confirming they currently have 2 other open, ongoing safety investigations at that exact Longview facility, entirely unrelated to this white liquor tank.
Yes. One of those active investigations is looking into a compromised valve on a highly dangerous ammonia tank.
Okay.
The other investigation was opened just this past May after someone filed an anonymous worker complaint about a massive sinkhole opening up on the property created by a failed underground drain.
It paints a very clear picture of an aging, sprawling facility playing an endless game of whack-a-mole with degrading infrastructure. An ammonia valve leaks over here, a sinkhole opens up over there. The company pays a $700 fine for a guardrail. And then suddenly, on a Tuesday morning, a 900,000-gallon steel catastrophe brings the whole system crashing down.
And this is exactly why the upcoming investigation is going to take months, if not years.
I bet.
State agencies first have to chemically stabilize the site, carefully recover the missing workers, drain the remaining 90,000 gallons of acid, and then painstakingly analyze the torn steel under a microscope
Right.
to figure out if this was a stuck vacuum valve, a corroded weld, or a systemic failure of safety culture.
It is an agonizing, terrifying waiting game for the families sitting in that union hall in Longview right now. We're absolutely going to keep a close eye on those state investigations as they develop and report back. But as we wrap up today's deep dive into these sources, what is the major takeaway? What is the lingering thought you are left with after analyzing all this data?
It raises a deeply uncomfortable question about the industrial infrastructure hiding in plain sight.
How so?
Well, if atmospheric tanks like this massive white liquor tank are structurally the weakest links in an industrial plant, it is often because they fall completely outside the strictest safety regulations. High-pressure vessels are heavily regulated because they act like bombs if they fail.
Right.
But atmospheric tanks operate at near ambient pressure, so they don't get the same intense, legally mandated scrutiny. If a massive steel structure can be ignored by regulators because it isn't technically a pressure vessel, yet a single corroded weld or one stuck vacuum valve can unleash 900,000 gallons of flesh-eating chemicals.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself,
Yeah.
how many other aging, thin-walled atmospheric tanks are sitting quietly in industrial parks right next to your own community, just one stuck valve away from a total collapse?
That is a chilling thought to leave on. A single stuck valve separating a community from disaster. I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive to unpack such a heavy ongoing story. If you found this breakdown helpful in understanding the mechanics and the human impact of what is happening in Longview, please take a moment to like, subscribe, share this deep dive with a friend who loves engineering or safety analysis, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update when we drop a new show. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time.